Hello everyone. Before we drift into history tonight, take a slow breath with me. In and out. Let the day loosen its hold. Let your shoulders fall. Sometimes, the past arrives like a soft wind through an open window, not demanding your attention, only brushing gently against your thoughts. Tonight, we'll travel back to a time of stone walls and candlelight, where the nights were long and warmth was something earned, not given. You don't need to remember dates or kings. You only need to listen softly and let the quiet courage of those who came before wrap around you like a blanket. As you listen, tell me in the comments, where are you tonight? What time is it where you are? It's always comforting to know who else is awake under the same quiet sky. Now, dim your lights, let the sound settle in your chest, and drift with me into the hush of the medieval night, where even the coldest winter had its quiet heartbeats of hope. The night begins slowly, the way old nights used to, with no electricity to break the dark, and no sound except the sigh of wind over distant hills. The world outside is silent, heavy, and endless. A low moon glows behind a thin veil of cloud, and everything it touches turns silver and still. Somewhere in that frozen landscape, a small home stands, hunched against the cold. Its roof, bowed under the weight of snow, looks as though it is praying a quiet wooden prayer against the cruelty of winter. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of smoke and damp wool. The walls breathe, they creak, shift, and whisper as if alive. The fire at the center is small, its flame unsteady but stubborn. The mother of the house leans forward, her hands roughened by years of frost and labor, gently pushing a log into the glowing heart of the hearth. For a brief moment, her face catches the light, soft lines, eyes dim with fatigue but alive with patience. Her breath curls into the air, pale as a ghost, then disappears. This is what survival looked like in the Middle Ages. No castles, no knights, no shining armor, just people ordinary, nameless, unseen, holding onto warmth, as if it were life itself. A child stirs beside the fire. His blanket is patched from whatever cloth could be found. Coarse linen, torn scraps, a piece of an old tunic. It is heavy and itchy, but it holds a fragile promise. You will wake again. Beneath it he dreams not of toys or tales, but of bread, of sunlight, of the brief kiss of spring that will come months from now. Outside, the wind scrapes along the frozen fields. It moves like an old animal searching for something lost. Through the thin gaps in the wooden walls, the cold leaks in not as an intruder, but as a reminder that nature rules everything, a reminder that comfort is a luxury, and endurance is the truest form of courage. The room itself is small, smaller than most modern kitchens. A single fire, a few tools, a wooden table, and a low bed stuffed with straw. Everything here has purpose. Nothing is for show. Every mark on the wall, every rough surface tells the same story. We lived, we tried, we endured. There is beauty here, though it hides beneath the hardship. The quiet beauty of hands working in the dark, the faint rhythm of breath shared between bodies huddled close, the small, imperfect beauty of a flame refusing to die. Sometimes the wind grows louder, pushing against the shutters, making them rattle. The child murmurs, half awake. The mother hums softly, not a song, just a sound, the sound of comfort older than words. She checks the fire again, lifting a piece of half-burned wood, turning it gently, coaxing it back to life. The ember glows, breathing red light over the dirt floor. In this dim world, warmth is sacred. Fire is a kind of god, not one to be worshipped with words, but with attention, care, and constant presence. If the flame dies, the night wins. So they guard it with tenderness, like a heartbeat that cannot be allowed to stop. Beyond the walls, the village sleeps under snow. Smoke rises from a few other roofs, drifting into the same grey sky. Each home is its own small universe, fragile and glowing. In every one of them, there is a fire, a family, and the same silent agreement with the world. We will make it through. The stars above are faint tonight. Even they seem distant, tired from watching so many winters. But the moonlight still touches the frozen path outside, where footprints have been covered by new snow traces of a day's labor quietly erased by night. Inside, time slows. The fire crackles softly, wood turning to ash. The mother finally sits beside her sleeping child, her body wrapped in a wool shawl patched with bits of old cloth. She closes her eyes, not to dream, but to rest within the sound of her own breath. Every few moments, she opens them again, instinctively checking the flame, the child, the wind. Even in half sleep, her care continues. In this age, love was not spoken. It was done through small, steady acts that kept the cold at bay. Somewhere, a rooster stirs too early, a soft sound, confused by the moonlight. The mother almost smiles. Another hour, maybe two, and the faintest color will touch the horizon. The longest part of the night is almost over. She reaches toward the fire, spreading her fingers toward its glow. The warmth touches her skin like memory. She whispers something to no one. Maybe a prayer, maybe just the simple thanks of someone still alive. Outside, the frost thickens, but inside, something holds. The flame flickers, bends, then steadies again. The house creaks, sighs, and waits. History often forgets nights like these, the quiet ones that carried humanity forward, one small ember at a time. But if you listen closely, you can still hear them, the breath of the past, slow and rhythmic, reminding us that survival itself was once an act of grace. So as you listen tonight, let the cold of that ancient world stay far away. Let the warmth of their fire find its way to you, a warmth made not from wood, but from love, patience, and the endless will to endure. Breathe softly. The night is long, but it is gentle now. Morning comes slowly in the medieval world, not with light spilling through windows, but with the faintest grey seeping through cracks in the wall. The fire from the night before still smoulders, its last embers whispering in the ash. The air is sharp, almost solid with cold. When the first breath leaves your mouth, it turns white and drifts like smoke. In this dim dawn, a small home wakes. There are no clocks, no chimes, no rush, only the slow rhythm of human movement. Someone stirring the fire, someone fetching water, someone whispering to a child still half asleep. Outside, the world waits in frost and silence. The house itself is humble, a hut of sticks and straw, walls sealed with mud. The peasants called it wattle and daub, but to those who lived within, it was simply home. The walls were never smooth. They bore the fingerprints of those who built them, rough, uneven, human. When the wind blew, the walls shuddered, but they held. When the rain came, the mud softened, but it did not fall. It was not beauty that built these homes. It was courage, the kind that grows quietly, in calloused hands and weary hearts. Imagine the feel of that world beneath your fingers, the texture of straw dipped in wet clay, the smell of earth and smoke, the chill of the morning air biting your skin. Every handful of mud was a small act of defiance against the cold. Every repaired crack was a prayer, pressed directly into the wall. In summer, the walls dried and hardened, warm to the touch. In winter, they froze sweating frost, weeping tiny beads of ice. Yet still they stood. They bent with the wind, swayed with the storm, but never truly broke. Inside, The floor was nothing but earth. It was swept smooth with bundles of dried grass, layered with straw or rushes. Over time, it darkened, packed down by countless steps, the footsteps of mothers and children, of work and rest and waiting. Sometimes herbs were scattered across it, lavender, mint, or sweet flag, to mask the smell of soil and smoke. Those scents became the house itself, wrapping every life within like invisible threads. The roof above was thatched thick bundles of straw tied carefully and layered to shed the rain. In winter, frost glittered across it like stars. Birds nested within, mice too, and the rustle of tiny creatures became part of the night's music. There was no such thing as silence here, only the soft symphony of living things surviving together. For all its roughness, the peasant's home was alive. It breathed, it moved, it endured. Its beauty was in its honesty, built not to impress, but to protect. When snow gathered high outside, the family would press straw against the door to block the draft. When wind howled, they would hum to the rhythm of its moan, as though answering it. These gestures were small, but they were everything, a conversation between people and the earth that sheltered them. To live this way was not weakness, it was knowledge. The peasants understood the land not as property, but as kin. The mud from their walls came from the same ground that fed them. The straw above their heads had grown in the same fields they tilled. Their houses were not separate from the world. They were part of it, returned to it every season, reshaped and reborn. Even the imperfections had meaning. A crack in the wall was not a failure, it was a story. It meant wind and rain and years. It meant the house had survived. In every floor there was proof of life continuing. At night, when the fire burned low, shadows crawled across those uneven walls, the flicker of flame dancing across fingerprints centuries old. You could almost believe that the walls remembered. The laughter, the coughs, the quiet songs whispered to infants, the arguments that faded into apology and sleep. The home was a keeper of memory, and yet it was fragile. A spark could undo it. A season of rain could eat through the roof. Every home in those times existed on the edge of loss, but so, too, did every person. Perhaps that is why they lived with such awareness. Every repair, every stroke of mud across a crack, every handful of straw pressed into place was an affirmation. We are still here. The courage of those lives was quiet. It did not ride into battle or earn a name in history. It was the courage of the daily, of the ordinary, the courage to rise each morning, mend what was broken, and keep the cold at bay. Sometimes, as the mother worked, she would pause, her hands muddy, her breath visible in the air. She would look toward the hills, where the faint light of dawn turned snow into soft silver. In that light, she felt a strange calm, a kind of peace that came not from comfort, but from understanding. She knew the world could take everything, but as long as she could rebuild, as long as she could press her hands into the earth and shape it again, she was never truly defeated. And so she returned to her work. The sound of straw, the wet slap of clay, the slow rhythm of making something that would hold, a rhythm older than language, older than kings, older than memory itself. Somewhere outside, a crow called rough and distant. The child stirred, rubbing his eyes, watching his mother work. He did not know the word bravery, but he would remember this: her steady hands, the warmth of the hearth, the scent of smoke, and the way the light found its way through every crack. This, too, was history not written in books, but in walls and in hearts that refused to stop trying. If you listen closely, you can still hear it, the soft sound of straw pressed into mud, of breath and earth and faith woven together, the quiet song of endurance. And maybe, in that sound, there is something for us too, a reminder that even in fragile places, courage grows. By evening, the light fades early. The sky lowers, pressing its weight onto the land, and a pale smoke rises from every roof. Thin, wavering threads that mark where life endures. Inside, the house grows dim. The walls drink the last of the daylight, and what remains is the soft pulse of fire, a flicker of orange, red, and gold breathing in the dark. In the medieval home, the hearth was not a decoration. It was the heart itself, the quiet axis around which life turned. Without it, the house was only cold earth and wood. With it, there was warmth, safety, food, and faith. The hearth was placed low, often just a shallow pit lined with stones. Smoke had no chimney to climb. It drifted freely through the room, finding its way toward the cracks in the roof, curling like memory before vanishing into the night. That smoke clung to everything: the walls, the straw, the hair, the breath. It tinted the air a soft grey, so that the home always seemed to exist between worlds, half earth, half cloud. To modern eyes, it might seem suffocating, but to those who lived here, the smoke was sacred. It meant the fire was alive. It meant the family would eat. It meant the night had not yet won. A woman crouches beside the flames. Her hands move with slow assurance, turning a pot that hangs from an iron hook. The stew within water, barley, a bone or two, bubbles gently, carrying a smell of salt and life. Steam rises, mingling with the smoke, and the air becomes thick, rich, and strangely soothing. Behind her, a child sits cross-legged, watching. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. The crackle of the wood is its own language, a rhythm older than words, a conversation between warmth and time. Every evening followed this pattern. Tend the fire, feed it, thank it. The act itself was prayer. A family might have gone days without seeing a priest, but every night they knelt before flame, their bodies lit by it, their breath joined to it, their hopes folded quietly into its glow. Sometimes, when the fire roared too high, they damped it with ash or covered the pot to muffle its song. Sometimes, when it faltered, they bent close, breathing softly, whispering encouragement. It was not unusual for someone to murmur to the flame, as though to a friend, stay with us." And it did, because fire, like faith, listens to gentleness. In this world, warmth had a rhythm. Every pop of the log, every hiss of sap, was a heartbeat in the stillness. When the wind groaned through the walls, the fire answered a low hum, steady and alive. Outside, snow fell without sound. It gathered on the roof, sliding down in slow, delicate sighs. The air beyond the door was the kind that bites skin, but in here, time softened. The light of the hearth spread itself along the floor, touching feet, hands, cheeks, a slow dance of comfort in a world that had little to spare. The smoke would sometimes sting their eyes, but they did not complain. It was the price of warmth, and in its scent, they could tell how the world was changing, what kind of wood burned, how wet the air had become, whether a storm was coming. Their senses were tuned to the fire, as surely as the stars were tuned to the night sky. In the far corner, the father mends a tool by firelight. The glow flashes over metal, then over the tired lines of his face. He does not rush. There is no need to hurry when the night is endless. Every movement has the calmness of ritual, sharpening, shaping, setting aside, then silence again. Only breath and crackle remain. The hearth was more than warmth, it was memory. It carried the voices of the day, the laughter that once echoed here, the stories told by elders, the quiet griefs that had no words. Smoke absorbed them all, lifting them upward to be lost among the stars. Children learned their first lessons by that fire: how to listen, how to mend, how to wait. They watched the adults tending flame, learning that life itself was something tended in the same way. Feed it gently, never leave it unattended, and it will carry you through the dark. In those simple acts, something profound lived. They had no grand philosophies, no written prayers, but they had this: the knowledge that warmth is a fragile miracle, that light must be guarded, and that love, too, burns quietly when cared for. Sometimes, the woman would take a stick, trace small shapes in the ash: a cross, a circle, a pattern she didn't name. Not superstition, not ritual, just the instinct of a heart seeking to belong in a vast, cold world. The child, drowsy now, lies near the fire, his cheek glowing in its light. His dreams are filled with its colors: red, gold, the soft gray of smoke. The woman hums again, the same melody that drifted through generations, a song without words, woven of warmth and fatigue. Outside, the wind shifts. The fire flutters, then steadies, as though answering some unseen question. Its breath fills the room again, patient, steady, kind. The night deepens. Somewhere far away, another fire flickers in another home, each one a small star of survival, each one breathing softly against the dark. And perhaps that is what connects us still, this quiet devotion to warmth, to light, to the fragile miracle of keeping something alive, in a world that forgets how easily things grow cold. So tonight, as you breathe and listen, imagine that same fire, the one that once burned in the heart of every home, its breath rising into the still air, carrying the soft promise of dawn. Night falls again, slow and patient, like a tide returning to shore. The fire has burned low, its light now a soft red breathing beneath the ash. Beyond the wooden walls, the wind drifts through the fields, singing its long, cold song. Inside, the air is thick and quiet, heavy with warmth, breath, and the closeness of life. Here, in the heart of winter, sleeping was not a solitary thing. It was a gathering, a quiet ritual of togetherness, as vital as food itself. Families, neighbors, even the animals sometimes, all drawn toward one another like embers pulled into a single flame. The medieval home did not know privacy as we do now. The room was one space, one body of air shared by all. When the night grew hard and the frost thickened, people slept in clusters: mother, father, child, grandparent, their limbs a tangle of warmth and fatigue. The smallest ones nestled closest to the hearth, where the air still trembled with the ghost of fire. It was not elegance, but instinct, a human knowing older than words. When the body touches another, something ancient stirs. The heart slows, the breath evens out. The skin, cold and starved of sun, remembers the comfort of contact. There were no soft linens, no beds carved from oak, just straw mats layered thick, maybe a thin blanket or two. The straw rustled when someone moved, its scent filling the dark with a sweetness of earth and animal. And in that fragile space between shiver and sleep, people drifted off, carried by the warmth of one another's breath. You could hear it, if you were there, the steady chorus of night, the sigh of an old man shifting his weight, the slow murmur of a mother dreaming, the faint whimper of a child finding the edge of rest. And underneath it all, the low hum of animals sleeping nearby, the rhythmic chewing of a cow, the gentle snore of a dog, the flutter of chickens rustling in straw. Life surrounded itself with life. The scent of the night was thick smoke, sweat, wool, and hay. It clung to every heartbeat. Yet, within it, there was peace. Because in this world, Comfort did not come from distance or space. It came from nearness, from the simple truth that warmth shared was warmth multiplied. In wealthier homes, there might have been beds, wooden frames, rope bases, feather mattresses. But for most, sleep meant the floor. A floor layered with straw, patched blankets, sometimes even cloaks still damp from the day. Still, the moment bodies drew close, none of that mattered. The human body became its own fire. A mother would often sleep with an infant pressed against her chest, her arm a wall against the cold. The child's breath rose and fell with hers, two rhythms blending into one. Across the room, an older child might curl against the father's back, finding warmth where skin met wool. It was not comfort in the modern sense, but it was safety, the kind of safety that hums quietly, without words. Outside, frost crept along the walls, drawing white veins across the wood. The wind searched for a way in, but the warmth inside pushed it back. The bodies, huddled together, radiated their own defense. In the silence, you could almost hear the balance, the old unspoken pact between cold and care. In some winters, the cold grew crueler. Families might share the same bed with animals, goats, a piglet, even chickens brought in from the dark. Their bodies, too, were warmth, their breath part of the living rhythm of the night. The smell was sharp, but no one complained. The line between man and beast blurred, and survival was a shared effort. Imagine it now. The low, smoky air, the glow of coals like sleeping eyes, the sound of slow breathing, many hearts beating in the same quiet room. There is something almost holy in it, though no prayers are spoken. It is the kind of holiness born not from words, but from closeness, from trust, from need, from love, without performance. Every now and then, someone would stir perhaps to feed the fire, or to pull a blanket higher. The straw would shift, the warmth would move, but the rest never fully broke. The rhythm of sleep held steady, soft and circular, like the turning of the earth itself. When dawn approached, a grey light would leak through the cracks in the roof. One by one, the sleepers began to stir, stiff, slow, but alive. The air smelled of smoke and breath, and in that smell was victory. The night had been endured. The cold had not won. There was no grand triumph, no celebration, only the small, quiet satisfaction of survival. A mother would rise, stretching her back, brushing straw from her clothes. A father would stir the embers, coaxing new life from the old fire. The children, blinking against the pale light, would shiver once before smiling. The warmth of the night would fade, but its memory lingered in the body, in the walls, in the faint impression of where one had rested against another. That memory carried them through the day, through hunger and labor and the unending cycle of cold, because every night would come again, and every night they would return to that small miracle, the shared heat of bodies, the quiet safety of being close enough to hear another heartbeat. It was the simplest of shelters, and yet it was everything. If you close your eyes, you can still feel it, that gentle weight beside you, the quiet warmth of breath on your skin, the small, eternal comfort of knowing you are not alone in the dark. By the middle of winter, the walls of a medieval home became thin as parchment. No matter how well patched, the cold always found a way in through cracks in the wood, through the seams of the roof, through the very breath of the air itself. So, the people learned not to fight against nature, but to live alongside it, and that meant bringing the farm inside. When the nights turned bitter, and the wind howled like an unseen creature circling the house, families opened their doors not to guests, but to their animals. Cows, goats, chickens, even the occasional sheep were welcomed into the same space where the family slept and ate. It sounds strange now, almost unthinkable, yet in that age it was an act of survival, and perhaps even of love. The warmth of a cow was worth more than gold. Its breath alone could lift the chill from a room, and so the peasants made room for them, not out of sentiment, but out of deep understanding. Imagine it, a small, dim hut in the heart of the night, the floor lined with straw, soft and uneven. In one corner, a cow lies down, her great sides rising and falling like slow waves. The faint steam of her breath mingles with the smoke from the hearth. Beside her, a goat shifts its hooves, the sound tapping lightly like a heartbeat against the earth. A hen perches near the door, feathers puffed and head tucked beneath her wing. And across from them, the family mother, father, children sleeping beneath blankets patched and heavy, their breaths joining the rhythm of the animal's sough. The room becomes something more than shelter. It becomes a living organism, a shared body of warmth, scent, and quiet life. The air hums with small sounds, the low chew of a cow, the faint cooing of chickens, the sigh of a sleeping child. Every sound overlaps, soft and imperfect, like threads in a single woven cloth. The smell, too, is thick and honest. Smoke, hay, wool, milk, and the faint sweetness of dung. It was not unpleasant to them. It was the smell of survival, a reminder that life still moved, still breathed, still endured. In such closeness, people learned patience. A restless goat might stir at midnight. A chicken might flutter in its dreams. The family would shift, murmur, adjust. No one complained. In the ancient balance of need, every life had its place. And in the quiet hours, something tender happened. A strange peace, born from coexistence. A child, half asleep, might reach out a small hand and feel the warm hide of a cow beside him. He would sigh and settle again, his small body instinctively drawn to that pulse of warmth. In a world where nothing was certain, where famine, frost, or fever could visit any season, this simple closeness was a miracle. They may not have had comfort, but they had connection. And connection, even unspoken, even smelly and raw, was a kind of grace. Sometimes, in the softest hours before dawn, the animals would stir before the people did. The goat would stretch, the cow would shift her weight, and low quietly, as if announcing that morning was near. The humans, hearing it, would rouse slowly, eyes blinking, hands reaching for firewood. Day and night were not marked by clocks here, but by the rhythms of breath and hunger shared across species. To live this way was to live inside the circle of life itself, to feel, every day, the closeness between human and creature, between warmth and gratitude, between labor and love. When the woman milked the cow at sunrise, her hands moved with reverence. The sound of milk striking the pail was soft, steady, familiar. The animal's breath rose in small white clouds that mixed with her own, and for a moment, they breathed the same air. Equal, alive, dependent, the same animals that gave warmth through the night would give milk, eggs, and work through the day. They were not separate from the family, but part of its heartbeat. Their patience, their silence, their enduring presence taught the peasants lessons that no sermon could teach. Lessons of humility, gratitude, and care. It is easy now to romanticize that life, to imagine peace in simplicity. But simplicity was not gentle. It was earned. Each moment of comfort carved from cold and hunger, each night's warmth shared with fur and feather. And yet, in those hardships, something luminous existed, a deep, wordless understanding that life, all life, was held together by warmth. Sometimes, when the wind grew quiet and the fire dimmed, The family would lie awake, listening to the slow breathing of their companions. It was not loneliness they felt, but belonging, for in the sound of the animals' sleep, there was proof that they were not alone in the vast dark. You can almost hear it now, if you close your eyes. The faint shuffle of hooves, the crackle of straw, the slow exhale of the hearth, the heartbeat of a shared home, where everything alive played its part. Perhaps that is the lesson the past still whispers, that survival was never a solitary act. It was always a chorus of breath, of body, of being, held together by the quiet warmth of those who simply stayed. Morning comes grey again, a soft, colourless light that seeps into the cracks of the wooden walls, tracing the outlines of everything it touches. The fire still smoulders from the night before, its breath faint but loyal. The air smells of ash, wool, and earth, the scent of a life that must continue, quietly and without complaint. A woman rises first. She wraps her shawl around her shoulders, the same shawl she's worn for years, patched, rough, and heavy. It was once brown, now dulled by smoke and time. She pulls it tighter, her fingers stiff, then bends to wake the children. Their faces are pink with sleep, hair tangled, eyes slow to open. The morning is cold enough that every breath leaves a trail of white between them. In this world, warmth does not come from fire alone. It comes from layers. Wool, linen, straw, dirt, even grease, all pressed against skin, all carrying their own kind of mercy. The people of these centuries knew that softness was rare. Comfort was not something given, it was something made. She dresses the children first, wrapping them in shirts of coarse linen, then in tunics of wool, patched and frayed at every seam. The garments are heavy with use, yet each thread holds the memory of countless days survived. Their smell is the same as the house itself, smoke, earth, and the faint sweetness of old sweat. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of persistence. The fabric scratches at their skin, but they do not cry. They have known no other kind of touch. Beneath the layers, their small bodies begin to warm, heat trapped and multiplied. The mother watches for a moment, her lips pressed in a quiet smile, then pulls her own woolen dress over her head. It, too, has been mended many times, the stitching uneven, but done with care. Over it, she ties an apron, its edges stiff with flour and age, then a scarf for her head, its ends tucked close beneath her chin. Layer by layer, she becomes ready not just to work, but to face the world's unending cold. The father sits near the fire, pulling on thick woolen hose, each one mismatched. His boots are worn and cracked, stuffed with straw for insulation. When he stands, the sound is soft but sure, the creak of leather, the hush of wool brushing wool. His movements are slow, deliberate. Dressing, too, is ritual, a daily reminder that survival is an act, not a condition. Clothing was not fashion in these times, it was armor. Armor against frost, against wind, against despair. Each layer said, "I will not yield." Even the dirt served its purpose. The peasants rarely washed during winter. Water was scarce and cruelly cold. Instead, they let the natural oils of their skin build up, sealing warmth in. The layers of grime were not shame, they were protection. Life itself had a texture, and it was rough. Sometimes, a child might pick up a clump of frozen mud from the floor and press it between their hands, laughing at how the cold bit their skin. The mother would scold gently, not out of anger but out of habit, then take their hands and warm them between her own, their fingers small and stiff, hers cracked and strong. The exchange of warmth was simple, wordless, a ritual older than any prayer. The clothes themselves were handmade, spun from sheep's wool, woven on wooden looms, dyed with whatever nature allowed. Walnut shells for brown, onion skins for gold, nettles for green, but more often than not, they were simply left undyed, the colors of the land itself, gray, brown, faded white, the palette of endurance. Each item was precious. A tunic could last a decade if mended enough times. Socks were shared, cloaks repurposed from one generation to the next. When fabric tore beyond repair, it was not discarded. It became padding, patch, or stuffing. Nothing truly ended. It was only changed, reshaped to serve again. At midday, as the pale sun reaches through the mist, the family steps outside. The cold bites immediately, crisp and honest, but their layers hold. You can see how they move together, the folds of fabric swaying like another body, part of them yet separate. Every step is muffled, every breath visible. They look, in a way, like walking earth, clothed in soil, wind, and time. The children laugh as they stamp their boots into the snow. Their mother watches, her eyes soft despite the lines etched deep from years of strain. She knows that laughter, like warmth, is something fragile, something you must keep kindled, or it disappears. As they work feeding animals, fetching water, clearing frost from the door, the layers grow damp, heavy, but they endure. Every motion creates warmth. Every moment becomes part of the quiet rhythm of living. When evening returns, they hang their clothes near the fire to dry. The room fills with the faint hiss of steam, the smell of wet wool rising like a gentle cloud. It mingles with the scent of smoke and stew, wrapping the space in something familiar and kind. The children doze by the fire, half-dressed, their small hands curled near the embers. The mother folds their garments carefully, setting them aside for mourning. To her, they are not rags, they are shields, woven from patience, necessity, and love. Before sleep, she sits a while, staring at the layers of her own skirt, the frayed edges, the uneven threads. In their imperfection, she sees beauty. Not the beauty of luxury or youth, but of endurance, the kind that lives quietly, without needing to be noticed. The house creaks softly, breathing again as it always does. Outside, snow begins to fall. Inside, the air is warm not because of comfort, but because of care. And as the mother finally closes her eyes, the thought comes to her like a whisper, that maybe what keeps them alive is not the layers of cloth at all, but the layers of love, woven slowly, worn daily, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, like a fabric that never tears. When darkness falls, the small home gathers itself into stillness once more. The chores are done, the tools set aside, the fire reduced to a red breath beneath the ash. Outside, frost has claimed the earth, the soil turned to stone, the air sharp enough to cut. Yet inside, within those humble walls of mud and timber, a softer world begins to unfold. The family prepares for sleep. There are no feather beds, no linen sheets, no pillows fluffed by gentle hands. There is only straw, a pile of it, freshly turned, spread across the dirt floor, the simplest kind of comfort, yet a comfort nonetheless. The straw is dry and golden, though flecked with dust and seed. It crackles softly when touched, a sound like whispers between leaves. It smells of fields long harvested of summer, stored and remembered. They call it a mattress, though it is little more than a mound of hay bound in rough fabric or a thin ticking sack. Yet when they lie down upon it, there is a sigh, the sound of bodies meeting rest, of earth receiving its children again. The straw shifts beneath their weight, forming to their shapes. It does not embrace softly, but honestly. For all its roughness, it holds them. The woman smooths a patch of straw where the child will sleep. She shakes away the chaff, spreads a thin blanket over it, and pats it down with her palm. The fire flickers low beside her, sending out small sparks that rise like fireflies and fade. Her husband has already set aside his boots, placing them near the hearth to dry. The air smells of smoke, wool, and the faint sweetness of hay, a fragrance that has become the scent of safety. The child crawls onto the straw bed, giggling at the tickle against his neck. He wriggles for a moment, then curls up, pulling the patched blanket to his chin. His laughter fades into a small sigh. The sound fills the room like a blessing. They have learned not to ask for softness. Softness, here, is not in the touch of cloth, but in the quiet after labor, in the nearness of those they love. Sometimes, in the depth of winter, the straw is damp at the edges, and the frost seeps up from the ground below. The family feels it through their blankets, a cold that hums like a slow ache in the bones. But they adjust, shift closer together, and the warmth of one body becomes the shield of another. When the night grows colder still, the mother will rise once or twice to stir the fire, to turn the straw, to check for dampness. She moves quietly, her feet bare, her breath visible in the air. The world outside may sleep, but she does not fully. There is a small part of her that always listens to the creak of wood, the sigh of wind, the stir of her child's breath. It is the same vigilance that has kept humankind alive since the beginning, the instinct to guard warmth against the dark. Sometimes, the straw rustles with more than movement. Fleas, mites, or mice may find their way in, small, uninvited companions. The peasants accepted it, not with disgust but with weary tolerance. To share one's bed with the living world was simply a fact of life. They scratched, swatted, sighed, and went on sleeping. Survival was not clean, but it was enduring. There is a quiet dignity in that, in choosing rest even when comfort is incomplete. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the rhythm of that old world, the creak of timber, the sigh of straw, the slow breathing of those who had given the day all they had. There is no music more human than this, the sound of exhaustion wrapped in peace. The straw bed was never meant to last. Each few months, it was turned, refilled, or replaced. The old straw, flattened, dirty, fragrant with smoke and sleep, was taken out to feed the fire or line the stalls for the animals. And then, a new layer would be brought in, fresh, yellow, alive with the faint crackle of the fields it came from. In that simple exchange, the old giving way to the new there was a rhythm, a quiet echo of the seasons, life, rest, decay, renewal. Even their sleep followed the cycle of the earth. For the poorest, even straw could be scarce. In those homes, people laid their bodies directly on rushes or dried moss. They learned to rest anywhere, on stone, on soil, on silence. And yet, their dreams came all the same. For dreams, like warmth, do not need luxury to exist. Perhaps the most tender image of all is the one never written in books, the way the family shared a single blanket, their limbs entangled, their breaths mingled, the straw beneath them whispering its soft, dry song. In that fragile, imperfect comfort, there was something unshakably pure, a reminder that peace is not always about plenty. Sometimes, it is simply about presence, about lying side by side, feeling another heartbeat in the dark, knowing you have made it through another day. Outside, frost glimmers like tiny stars across the fields. The moonlight rests gently on the roof, tracing every thatch with silver. Inside, the straw bed sighs beneath sleeping bodies. The fire gives one last pop, a spark, a glow, then rest. And the night continues, cold, vast, eternal. But within this small house, there is warmth and there is love. Morning begins before the light. The world outside is silent, too cold for birds, too still for footsteps. But within the small home, something ancient stirs. the quiet ritual of making bread. It is not a luxury here. It is survival, the thread that ties one day to the next. The woman moves first, rising from her straw bed while the rest still sleep. She kneels beside the hearth, stirring the embers until they glow. A thin smoke coils upward, silver in the darkness. Her hands are rough, the skin cracked from frost and work, yet they move with a kind of grace born only from repetition. On the small table, a wooden bowl waits inside, the memory of flour. Not much remains. She tips in the last handful of coarse ground grain, the color of pale dust. Then she pours water, cold as stone, and begins to mix. There is no yeast in this world, no fine white powder or golden crust, only flour, salt, and patience. The dough clings stubbornly to her fingers, heavy and uneven. She works it slowly, pressing and folding, her breath rising in soft clouds with every push. The sound is rhythmic, the soft thud of hands against wood, the whisper of air through cracks in the wall. In that rhythm lives a quiet strength, the heartbeat of those who endure. Behind her, the fire grows. It crackles like gentle applause. The smell of smoke and grain mingles, warm and raw. Soon, others stir. The man rubs his eyes. The children yawn, their hair wild and faces red from sleep. They do not speak. There are few words in the morning, only movement, the small symphony of a life being built again. The woman shapes the dough into small rounds, presses them flat with the heel of her hand, then lays them on a hot stone beside the fire. The dough hisses as it meets the heat, a sound like a sigh, a moment of surrender. Slowly, the smell begins to fill the room, nutty, earthy, faintly sweet, the scent of hope made tangible. The man tends the fire while the children sit close, waiting. Hunger has already awakened. It lives with them like another member of the family, invisible, but always present. The youngest reaches out a hand toward the bread. Too soon. The mother smiles gently, shaking her head. "Not yet," she whispers. "Let it live a little longer." When the bread is ready, its surface is dark and uneven, dotted with ash. She lifts one piece, breaks it with her hands, and steam escapes soft, white, alive. The children lean forward, eyes bright. Each receives a small portion, no more than a handful, but in that moment it feels abundant. They eat slowly, reverently. Even the father takes his piece with care, breaking it again to share with the smallest. They chew in silence. The taste is plain grain, smoke, salt, yet it fills more than their bellies. It fills the space between them. To eat together is to say, we are still here. Outside, the world remains cold, indifferent, but inside, the warmth of bread and fire gathers them like a small constellation of light. The mother watches their faces, crumbs on lips, eyes heavy with peace, and feels a quiet satisfaction settle over her like a shawl. For centuries, bread has been the humblest prayer. It does not demand, it forgives. It speaks in the language of hands mixing, shaping, giving. It asks only that you wait, that you trust heat and time. In the great halls of the rich, bread was golden and soft. But here, it was dense, dark, sometimes bitter, and yet perhaps it tasted better, because each bite carried the memory of work, of patience, of survival. When there was not enough grain, they mixed in what they could: ground peas, acorns, bark, anything that stretched the meal further. Even so, they never threw it away. A crust, however small, was sacred. It was shared, saved, or softened again in broth the next night. Nothing was wasted. Not food, not effort, not hope. The children learned early the reverence of this act. Before eating, they crossed themselves, not out of ritual alone, but out of gratitude. They knew, even if they could not yet explain, that bread was more than sustenance. It was the line that connected them to life itself. The woman wipes her hands on her apron, flour leaving pale marks across the fabric. For a moment, she simply stands still, watching the firelight flicker across the room. The smell of baked grain lingers, soft and good. It feels almost like memory, something both gone and eternal. The family eats what little they have, leaving only crumbs on the wooden board. The mother sweeps them gently into her palm and drops them into the fire. Tiny sparks leap up, and for a second, the room glows a little brighter. Outside, the day has come grey, quiet, endless. There will be work again, hauling, feeding, mending. But for now there is warmth inside, and the taste of something that has passed through fire and become more than itself. Bread, even when small, carries the echo of abundance. It is life condensed, the simplest form of grace. And so, every morning begins the same. The kneading, the waiting, the breaking, the sharing, a ritual repeated across centuries, soft as breath, steady as love. If you close your eyes, you can almost smell it. The grain, the smoke, the warmth, and you can almost hear the whisper that has followed humanity, from fire to field to hearth. Eat, live, remember. By midday, the warmth of the fire has faded to a quiet ember. The house breathes in rhythm with the wind, slow, creaking, patient. Beyond the door, the world glistens white, frozen in place. But inside, life stirs again. It is time to fetch water. Of all the labors in medieval life, few were as constant or as quiet as this. Water was not merely needed, it was everything, for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and the small mercy of washing. Yet it was never near. It had to be earned. The man takes up the bucket, its wooden frame swollen from years of use. The handle creaks like bone as he lifts it. Outside, his breath rises in clouds that fade into the still air. His boots crunch against the frozen ground, each step echoing faintly across the sleeping fields. The well stands a short walk away, a ring of stone rimmed with frost, its rope stiff with ice. He lowers the bucket slowly, the rope groaning as it descends. The sound of it slipping into the darkness feels older than language, a slow spiral into the heart of the earth. When it hits the surface, there's a soft splash, almost gentle, and then silence. He waits a moment, lets it fill, then pulls. The rope bites at his hands. The cold is sharp, raw, a pain that hums instead of screams. When the bucket emerges, its rim glitters with frost, the water inside dark and pure as glass. He sets it down carefully, exhales, and for a moment just looks at it, the surface trembling, catching the faintest light. It is a simple thing, a bucket of water, yet here it holds the same reverence as wine. Back inside, the woman meets him at the door, takes the bucket with both hands, careful not to spill. The children watch, their eyes curious, their breath visible. She dips a ladle in, tastes first just a sip, and nods. It is good, cold, clear, real. They drink sparingly. Each mouthful feels like a ceremony, a reminder of the earth's patience, the labor of the body, the gift of something invisible yet essential. Then, with what remains, she begins to wash. Not her face, not her hands. Those come last, but the things that keep the family alive. The bowls, the knives, the pot that held the morning's bread. She moves slowly, almost reverently, dipping the cloth, scrubbing, wringing. The water clouds quickly, darkening with ash and grain and memory. When she's done, She pours it out behind the house, onto the frozen earth. It steams briefly, a ghostly sigh against the cold before vanishing. Nothing wasted, nothing taken for granted. Only after the chores are finished does she wash her hands. The gesture is simple, yet sacred, the contact between skin and cold water, the brief sting that wakes the blood. Her hands are cracked, reddened, alive. She rubs them together, lifts them toward the fire, and for a moment, it seems the world has paused. One quiet human caught between two elements, water and flame. The children mimic her, dipping their fingers, laughing at the chill. Their small voices fill the room again, light, fleeting, warm. Outside, the man carries what's left of the water to the animals. The cow drinks slowly, steam rising from her muzzle. The goat nudges closer, the chickens pecking at the edges of the puddle. Life passes from bucket to mouth, from hand to creature, a quiet chain of giving. The act seems small, yet it is everything. To share water is to acknowledge a truth older than civilization itself, that all life, no matter how humble, is connected by thirst. As the day wanes, the bucket is hung by the hearth, empty now but glistening faintly, where droplets still cling to its rim. It will be filled again tomorrow, and the day after, as it always has been. Water, like love, is never truly owned, only carried, borrowed, given. Later, as dusk settles and the air grows colder, the woman takes a cloth, dips it once more into the last bit of clean water, and gently wipes the child's face. The child laughs softly, the shock of cold making his cheeks pink. She smiles, wrings out the cloth, and hangs it by the fire. That small act, a mother's touch, a moment of care, is perhaps the truest form of prayer this house will ever know. They do not speak of gratitude, but it lives in their gestures. Every time the bucket is lifted, every drop poured with care, they speak the same wordless thank you to the world that sustains them. Outside, the snow continues to fall. The well waits, dark and deep, holding its quiet promise. And in the soft hush of evening, the home breathes again, the faint steam of stew, the murmur of voices, the gentle pulse of fire. Nothing grand happens here, but within this rhythm, the lifting, the carrying, the washing, the sharing, there is a kind of holiness that asks for no witness. If you listen closely, you might hear it even now, the sound of a bucket touching water, the sigh of hands meeting cold, the soft whisper that says, "This is enough." There are days in winter when even time seems to freeze. The air feels too heavy to move, the breath too slow to speak. Yet life stubborn, patient continues. It must. The medieval day did not wait for comfort. When dawn crept pale over the horizon, the world demanded movement. Work was not a choice. It was the quiet rhythm that kept everything from falling apart. Outside, frost clung to the fields like glass. The soil, hard as iron, no longer yielded to the plow. The animals, once restless, now moved slowly, each step careful, deliberate, their breath rising in plumes of ghostly white. The people matched that rhythm. They moved without hurry, conserving energy, letting the body guide the day. The father begins his chores first. He steps into the cold, breath sharp, hands red against the wind. He checks the animals, a cow, a goat, the few chickens still surviving the frost. He breaks the thin ice that's formed over their trough, then scatters hay, his breath sinking with the sound of its fall. The barn smells of old straw and steam, of animal life and quiet endurance. Each motion is small, yet sacred. To feed, to tend, to repair, these are not labors of ambition, but of faith. Faith that the world will keep turning, that warmth will return, that this day too, will end in safety. Inside, the woman begins her own steady tasks. She grinds the last of the grain between stone, her arms moving in circles that have been drawn by generations. The sound is low and soft, a heartbeat against the silence. Flour rises in faint clouds, coating her sleeves like snow. She pauses to stir the stew hanging above the hearth, only barley and water today, with a bone for flavor. The smell is thin but kind. She adds a pinch of salt, knowing how precious it is, and tastes it once with her finger. Then she sits back, resting her hands in her lap, watching the fire as though it might tell her something. Around her, the children help in small ways. One gathers sticks for kindling, another brushes frost from the inside of the window. Their laughter is quiet, not from joy but from life insisting on being gentle even here. In the corner, an old cat curls into itself, its fur rising and falling with the rhythm of the room. The hours pass without hurry. The light remains pale, almost colorless, like a candle burning behind fog. Outside, nothing stirs except the whisper of wind through the thatch. At midday, the father returns, his face lined with cold, his beard silvered with frost. He carries nothing in his hands. There is little to bring in this season, but his presence itself feels like something solid, something earned. He sits near the fire, stretching his hands toward the heat. His palms tremble slightly, not from weakness, but from relief. The warmth travels slowly through him, thawing the stiffness that labor always leaves behind. The woman ladles the stew into wooden bowls. The steam rises like a blessing. The children eat quietly, blowing at their spoons. The father eats last, slowly, as though tasting the worth of the morning in each mouthful. No one speaks much. There is nothing new to say, and yet, the silence between them is not empty. It holds the weight of trust. When the meal is done, the woman wipes the bowls with a scrap of bread. Nothing is wasted. Not a crumb, not a drop, not a motion. Outside, the sky begins to darken, though the day has hardly felt begun. In winter, light is a brief visitor, and darkness comes not as an intruder, but as an old companion. The father steps out once more before nightfall, checking the animals again. The woman mends a tear in her child's sleeve, her needle glinting like a star each time it catches the firelight. There is a strange peace in this repetition, in doing the same things every day, even when they change nothing. Perhaps it is in this rhythm that people of that time found meaning, not in progress, but in persistence. The wind rises at dusk. It hums low against the walls, brushing through cracks, lifting dust. The fire answers softly, its light flickering gold against the beams. The family gathers near it again, as they always do, the circle of warmth closing around them like a secret. The father leans back, eyes heavy. The woman hums a little, an old tune without words. The children drift toward sleep, their heads resting against folded arms. Outside, winter deepens. The world grows quiet enough that even silence seems to make a sound. The sound of snow falling somewhere unseen, of night expanding like breath. And still, life continues. Small, patient, kind. For this is how survival looks when stripped of pride. Not heroic, not loud, but steady, rhythmic, faithful. To work without hope of reward. To warm a home with hands cracked by cold. To believe, without saying so, that spring will come again. This is what it means to live through winter. Not to fight it, but to move with it. To breathe in its stillness. To trust that even the frozen ground is only sleeping. If you listen now, you can almost hear it. The faint whisper of straw underfoot, the soft scrape of spoon on bowl, the long sigh of wind passing through wood. A music without melody, but full of meaning. The song of work that never stops, and of hearts that never harden, no matter how cold the world becomes. Sunday arrives without fanfare. It is not a day of rest so much as a change in rhythm, a pause between 1 week of survival and the next. The chores still happen, the animals still need feeding, but for a few hours, the village slows. The sound of tools quiets. Smoke rises slower. Voices drop to whispers. The church bell begins its slow toll across the valley. Its sound is not bright or triumphant. It is old, heavy, like the echo of metal remembering its maker. Each note drifts through the mist, across the frozen fields, into every small house tucked beneath the hills. The families know what it means. It is time to gather. They dress carefully, not in new clothes, but in their cleanest. The woman shakes the frost from a faded shawl. The man pulls on his thickest cloak. The children, their faces red from the cold, hold hands as they walk the narrow path that winds toward the village square. The world is silent except for the crunch of boots and the low murmur of prayers whispered into scarves. Smoke curls from chimneys, and the sky above is a flat grey sheet, waiting for snow. The church stands at the center of everything, small, stone, unadorned. Its walls are streaked with damp, its door carved by countless winters. Yet when they step inside, the air feels different, not warmer, not brighter, but gentler, as though sound itself knows to hush. The floor is stone, cold beneath their feet. Candles flicker along the walls, their flames trembling like tiny souls. The scent is thick with wax and wood smoke, and faintly, the sweetness of pine needles laid near the altar. The villagers kneel in silence. Some close their eyes, others stare at the worn carvings that line the beams. The priest begins to speak, his voice low, measured, steady. He does not shout, for the people here do not need convincing. They have already lived the truth of what he says: suffering, patience, endurance, and faith. The sermon is not about grandeur. It is about mercy, about small kindnesses that hold the world together when nothing else will. He speaks of warmth, of sharing bread, of lifting those who stumble. His words rise like smoke, soft, slow, curling into the rafters until they fade into air. Outside, the wind pushes against the door, but the church stands unmoved. Inside, the people breathe as one. A child fidgets beside his mother. She places a hand on his head, smoothing his hair. The gesture is simple, yet in this quiet place, it feels like prayer, the kind that needs no words. The priest ends with a blessing, crossing the air before him. He says, "Go in peace." End. And though peace is rare here, the people nod. They understand. Peace is not something given, it is something carried. When the service ends, no one rushes out. They linger. The warmth of candles and presents holds them in place for a few heartbeats longer. Some whisper to one another, not about heaven, but about the weather, the animals, the sick neighbor who still needs wood for the fire. Faith, here, is not distant. It is practical. Outside, the snow has begun. The flakes fall heavy and slow, landing on cloaks and hoods, melting into wool. The path back home seems longer now, yet no one complains. Their breath rises in clouds that mingle together, invisible prayers carried upward into the grey. Back inside the house, the fire is rekindled. The woman removes her shawl, shaking out the melted snow. The man sits by the hearth, silent for a while, his eyes distant but calm. The children huddle near the warmth again, chattering softly about the echoes of the bell and the light of the candles. The sound of the church still lingers in the air, not as a ringing, but as a quiet pulse. It lives in the rhythm of their movements, in the patience of their hands. The woman crosses herself once more before returning to her work, not out of fear, but habit a small anchor in a drifting sea of days. The priest's words remain with her. Share warmth, lift others, keep the flame. She looks at her children, her husband, the little home they have made, and she knows this is her church. The walls of mud and smoke are her chapel, the hearth her altar, her hands the candles. In that moment, the divine feels closer than it ever could in stone halls or gilded cathedrals. Here, God is not a king, but a breath in the cold, a spark in the dark, a stillness between two heartbeats. The wind presses again against the door. It moans softly, then gives up. The fire pops, once a small reminder that light, too, is alive. The man reaches for the woman's hand. They do not speak. They do not need to. Between them, there is something quiet and strong, the same thing that carried them through the week, that will carry them through the next. Outside, the bell tolls once more, faint now, distant. The sound rolls through the valley and fades into snow. And for a moment, all things, the people, the fire, the falling sky, seem to breathe in the same rhythm. Stillness, again, not emptiness, but grace. When evening comes, it does not arrive with color. It seeps in, slow and gray, like smoke spreading through the air. The day folds itself away, one breath at a time, until the world seems to exhale and go still. Inside the small home, the fire burns low, its glow a soft heartbeat in the dark. Shadows stretch long across the walls, shapes of things both real and remembered. A hanging pot, a wooden spoon, a handprint from the child that never faded. This hour, between light and night, is not meant for words. It is the time when life turns inward, when even the walls seem to listen. The family moves softly. The woman adds a log to the fire, careful not to disturb the sleeping cat curled by the hearth. The man sits nearby, mending a strap of leather by touch more than sight. His fingers are rough, his posture bent, but his motions are steady, each stitch a small act of care. The children whisper to one another under the blanket. Their voices rise and fall like small birds behind a hedge. They are too young to understand the weight of the season, too full of wonder to be afraid of the dark. The eldest traces circles in the frost on the window, pretending it's a map of distant lands. The youngest hums a tune, one taught by his mother, half lullaby, half prayer. In this world, nightfall is not an enemy. It is a reminder to stop, to yield, to let the body rest so the soul may wander. The woman moves toward the door and opens it slightly. The cold slips in at once, sharp, clean, infinite. She looks out across the fields. Snow glimmers faintly under the rising moon, and in the distance, she can see the faint lights of other homes, scattered like embers across the dark. She knows those lights well. They are lives, mirroring her own. Women stirring fires, men hanging tools, children drifting into dreams. The thought brings her peace. She closes the door again and lingers by the fire. Her hands are cracked, the skin lined like dry riverbeds, but when she lifts them toward the light, they glow. These are hands that have carried water, shaped bread, soothed fever, and held the world together without ever being seen. The man looks up from his work. He says nothing, but their eyes meet, and in that small glance lives everything they cannot afford to say aloud. Gratitude, weariness, love, the quiet acknowledgement that survival is a shared language, spoken best in silence. He sets the strap aside, flexes his hands, and stares into the fire. The flames are low now, licking faintly at the wood. Sparks rise like thoughts and vanish. They eat what remains from the pot, a thin broth of barley and herbs. Each takes their turn, spooning gently, careful to leave enough for the next. The sound of eating, the clink of metal, the The soft breath between bites fills the room like music. When the pot is empty, the woman wipes the rim clean and sets it aside. She takes a bit of thread and begins to mend a tear in her son's blanket. The rhythm of the needle is slow, patient. The firelight dances across her face, softening the lines carved by time. Outside, the wind gathers. It moves around the house like a ghost remembering its old home. The walls creak, the roof sighs, but the home holds. The man begins to speak then, his voice quiet, more like memory than conversation. He tells the children a story not of kings or battles, but of a winter long ago, when he was young and the river froze so deep you could walk from one village to the next. The children listen, wide-eyed. The fire paints the story across their faces, turning the years into light. The woman smiles, listening. She's heard this story 100 times, yet it never grows old. It is not about the river. It is about continuity, about knowing that before them, someone else also endured, and after them, someone will again. When the story ends, silence returns deep, kind, unbroken. The father leans back, his eyes heavy. The children lie down, their breathing slowing, their faces soft in the dim glow. The mother stays awake a while longer, watching the fire, adding a twig now and then not to feed the flame, but to keep the silence company. She thinks of the seasons ahead, of spring and thaw, of mud and planting, of laughter that will return to the fields. But she does not wish for them, not yet. Tonight, she allows herself to simply exist here, now, in this breath between years. The sound of the wind outside shifts from moan to whisper, from whisper to calm. Snow falls again, soft and unhurried. The house becomes a small island of light, floating in the dark sea of winter. In the corner, the last candle trembles. The flame bends, straightens, then bends again, as though breathing. The woman watches it for a long time. There is something in that small, trembling light, something human, fragile, and eternal. Before lying down, she crosses herself and whispers a few words. Not quite prayer, not quite thought. Let us wake warm. Let the morning come. She pulls the blanket over her shoulders and lies beside her children. The man's hand finds hers under the fabric. Their fingers meet, rough against rough, warmth against warmth. And as the fire sighs its last, and the world slips into stillness, there is no fear, only a soft trust that, somehow, the night will end as gently as it began. The house sleeps, the fields sleep, the wind drifts onward. Only the stars remain awake, watching, ancient, kind, and beneath them, in this small patch of time, a family dreams together, quietly, steadfastly, alive. There are nights in winter when the past feels closer than the fire. The walls hold more than warmth, they hold memory, faint, invisible, but alive. And as the family sleeps, the world outside whispers reminders of seasons gone, of sun and soil, of rain that once fell like laughter. The man dreams of fields green with barley, the smell of earth after rain. He dreams of bending his back under a kind sky, of soil crumbling between his fingers like bread. In the dream, the air is full of light, and the sweat on his neck is a sign of life, not burden. The scythe swings, grain falls, and for a moment, everything feels endless, like time has stopped to listen to the hum of the earth itself. The woman dreams too. She is standing by a stream, her hands submerged in water that dances. The sound of it is bright and full, a language she once knew by heart. She sees her own reflection, younger, softer, and beside her, a child laughing, splashing, chasing sunlight on ripples. The sound is so real she can almost reach for it. Then she wakes, and the only sound is the quiet hiss of the dying fire. For a moment, she stays still, eyes open to the dark. The dream fades, but its warmth lingers. She knows it is not sadness she feels, but something gentler, the ache of remembering what was once simple. She sits up and listens. The wind outside has softened to a hum. The roof creaks as the snow settles. She looks around, her family, breathing slow, faces calm. She feels gratitude rise like warmth in her chest, not for comfort, but for presence, for the fact that, tonight, they are together and alive. In winter, gratitude often hides behind silence. It is rarely spoken, but always known. The man shows it in the way he tends the fire without being asked. The woman shows it when she saves the last crust of bread for the children. Even the children, in their small way, show it by not crying when the cold seeps through the blanket. The past is not gone. It lives quietly in gestures like these. She lies back down and closes her eyes, but her thoughts linger. She remembers the sound of bees in the orchard, the low hum that filled the air like music. She remembers kneeling among rows of carrots, the soil soft beneath her knees, the smell of green things alive. She remembers the evenings when the sky glowed orange and the children chased fireflies until the dark swallowed them whole. Those moments return to her now, not to wound, but to warm like embers from another season still glowing beneath the ash. Outside, the snow glows faintly in the moonlight, smooth and untouched. But under that cold skin, the earth still breathes. Seeds sleep there, patient and certain. Roots hold their silence, waiting for the thaw. It comforts her, this thought that life, even when unseen, is never truly still. The world may seem frozen, but beneath the quiet, 1,000 small things prepare to begin again. She reaches out and touches her husband's hand in sleep. His skin is rough, the callus is thick, but there is peace in his grip, the peace of someone who has given his strength to the day and found rest in return. She listens to his breathing. It reminds her of the ocean she has never seen, but sometimes imagines slow, steady, eternal. In the corner, the last flame on the hearth wavers. Its glow flickers across the wall, painting ghosts of summer on rough wood, shadows of trees, fields, laughter. She watches until the image fades, replaced by darkness. And still, she feels warmth. Perhaps this is what faith truly is, not a promise of paradise, but the quiet knowledge that warmth will return. That spring, though distant, already lives inside the earth, just as love lives inside the long silence of winter nights. She remembers a saying her mother once whispered during a storm. Even the snow remembers the Sunday. It seemed simple then. Now, it feels like truth. The fire gives one last crackle. The air cools. The room grows softer. The woman closes her eyes again, carrying that sentence with her into sleep. The man shifts slightly, his hands still holding hers. The children stir and sigh, as though answering dreams of their own. The night deepens, stretching wide across the fields. The world lies still, but within it, everything continues. The slow pulse of the earth, the quiet turning of time. Somewhere beneath the snow, water begins to move again. Invisible, but unstoppable. And though no one wakes to hear it, the land is already whispering its first small promise of spring. By midwinter, darkness becomes an old companion. The days shorten until morning and night seem to blur together, one long twilight stretching across the world. The villagers no longer count hours by the sun, but by the fire. Light in this season is something earned. The family wakes later now. The cold keeps them under blankets longer, and even when they rise, their movements are slow, half dreaming. The woman stirs the embers, coaxing life back into the fire. The man sits nearby, sharpening his knife, the rhythmic scrape of metal, filling the room with quiet purpose. The first light to reach them each morning is not from the sky, but from the hearth. It flickers against their faces, painting them in gold and shadow. There are few candles left. Each one is precious, made of tallow poured into small clay molds, their wicks twisted from thread and hope. The woman lights one only when necessary, shielding it from drafts with her hand as though protecting a child. Its flame is small, trembling, but it gives the room a kind of dignity, as if this light, though fragile, insists on being seen. The children gather around it, mesmerized. They play with its reflection in a spoon, their laughter soft, careful, so as not to disturb the flame. The mother watches them with the same tenderness she gives to the light because she knows both can vanish with one careless breath. The candle burns low by afternoon, its wax curling like petals around the wick. The woman trims it gently, saving every bit that drips. Nothing is wasted here, not wax, not time, not faith. When the sky begins to fade again, the man sets a new log on the fire. Sparks leap upward, quick as stars, then dissolve. The house smells of smoke, wood, and the faint sweetness of wax, a scent that feels like survival itself. Outside, the snow glows blue in the dim light. The world seems endless, yet small, as though time itself has paused just above the frozen ground. The woman sits near the hearth, spinning thread. Her hands move without thought, the motion of generations. The soft sound of fiber twisting into string joins the crackle of fire, forming a rhythm as old as breath. She hums a tune under her breath. It has no words, only notes, slow, low, circular, like a lullaby for the evening. The melody floats through the air, filling the house with something gentler than silence. The man looks up briefly, his eyes reflecting the light. He smiles. He does not remember when he first heard that song. Perhaps from his own mother, perhaps from no one at all. Some songs are born not from memory, but from need. The children sit on the floor, trying to copy her hum. Their voices stumble, overlap, blend imperfect, but beautiful in their effort. The woman laughs softly, then quiets them with a touch. The candle flickers again, shadows trembling on the wall. Each face glows softly in its reach, 4 small portraits of endurance. Outside, the wind rises. It scratches at the walls, testing the edges of the door. Snow drifts against the window, muffling the sound of the world. Yet inside, there is warmth, not much, but enough. In the deep quiet of the evening, the man begins to carve a small piece of wood. His hands know the shape even before his eyes decide it. Slowly, the figure emerges a bird, simple and rough, wings folded as if in rest. When he finishes, he places it on the mantel beside the candle. The woman watches, her lips curving in a faint smile. The children lean closer, whispering guesses. Is it a dove, a sparrow, an angel? The father only shrugs. Just a bird, he says. But in his voice, there is something deeper, as though the act itself was a quiet blessing. Later, when the candle burns to its end, the woman cups her hand around the last bit of flame, letting it linger a heartbeat longer before it dies. The smell of smoke curls upward, fading like breath in the air. Darkness returns, gentle and full. They sit for a while, letting their eyes adjust to the faint glow of embers. The world becomes soft again, outlines instead of details, warmth instead of brightness. The youngest child speaks then, barely above a whisper. Why do we light candles, he asks, if they always go out? The woman looks at him for a long moment before answering. So we remember the light, she says. So we know it can come back. The boy nods, though he doesn't yet understand. Someday he will. The fire crackles softly, as though agreeing. Soon, One by one, they lie down again, beneath patched blankets, beside the soft hiss of wood turning to ash. The bird on the mantel catches what little light remains, its carved wings glinting faintly before the room falls into full dark. And yet, even in that dark, something lingers. The warmth of the song, the memory of flame, the shared understanding that tomorrow they will do it again. For that is the quiet miracle of those who endure winter. They do not chase the Sunday. They build their own small lights, again and again, until spring finds them waiting. There comes a night in every winter that feels endless, the one where darkness deepens not only outside, but inside too. The villagers call it the longest night, though no one marks the hours. They know it not by the stars, but by the way silence thickens, and the way firelight seems smaller than before. It is the heart of winter, the turning point, the night before the world begins quietly to return toward light. Inside the small home, the family feels it. The air is colder, the fire burns lower, even though they've fed it the same as always. Every breath seems to echo longer, every sound travels farther, as if the walls themselves have grown thinner between this world and whatever lies beyond it. The woman draws her shawl tighter. The man sits still, his eyes fixed on the flame. The children have gone quiet, sensing something they can't name, a kind of pause that settles over everything alive. Even the cat does not stir. Outside, the sky is ink a black so deep it feels like water. The moon hides behind heavy clouds. Only snow gives off light now, reflecting the faintest glow from the unseen heavens. The air is motionless. It is as if the world is holding its breath. The woman reaches for the poker and stirs the coals. They flare briefly, red and gold, then fade again. She whispers to no one in particular, "We just have to get through the night." Her husband nods, though she cannot see it. He understands. Winter has always been a waiting for warmth, for dawn, for the first sound of thaw. To pass the time, he begins to speak. Not loudly, his words drift out like smoke, slow and curling. He tells a story he once heard from his father about a night like this, when the cold grew so strong it cracked the beams of houses, and the people feared the sun would not rise again. So they gathered together, lit their fires, and sang through the darkness. They sang not to summon the sun, but to remind one another that it still existed. "Did it come back?" the eldest child asks, voice small. The man smiles faintly. "Always," he says. "It always comes back." The woman listens, and something inside her softens. The story is simple, but it holds what they need most tonight. Not proof, but promise. The children drift closer to their parents, the blankets pulled higher around their faces. Their eyes catch the firelight, wide and wondering. The father's voice continues low, patient, weaving between the breaths of flame. He speaks of light hidden in the earth, sleeping until it's ready to wake. He speaks of people who kept watch through nights longer than this, and of how they endured not with strength, but with gentleness. The woman closes her eyes. She can almost see it, the long line of those who came before, each guarding a flame, each trusting that it would last just one more hour. She feels their presence invisible, steady, kind. The room grows quieter still. The fire's crackle slows to a whisper. One log collapses inward with a sigh. The light dims, turning the faces around it into soft shadows. The man reaches out, placing another log onto the fire. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a spark, a flicker, a breath of flame catching the wood. It's small, fragile, but real. The woman exhales in relief, and the children smile. "See?" the man murmurs. "Even the smallest light is enough." They watch the fire grow. Slowly, color returns to the room. The red of ember, the gold of flame, the brown of wood. the faint glimmer of woolen skin. The air warms again, bit by bit, as though encouraged by their belief. Outside, the wind stirs. Snow begins to fall not in anger, but in peace. Large, soft flakes drift down, catching the faint light from the windows. The sound is like silence made visible. The woman hums the same tune she sang the night before. The melody rises and falls like breathing, circling the room, wrapping the family in sound and comfort. The man leans his head back and closes his eyes. The children listen, their faces softening, their bodies relaxing into the rhythm of the song. It is a lullaby older than memory, not meant to ward off darkness, but to make peace with it. Hours pass. The flame burns lower again, but now it no longer feels threatening. The darkness has changed. It is no longer a void, but a cradle. The mother's voice grows quieter. Her song fades into the steady sound of wood settling, of wind brushing against stone, of the steady breath of sleep. One by one, they drift away, the children first, then the man. The woman remains awake for a while longer, watching the last ember pulse like a heartbeat. Outside, dawn is nowhere to be seen yet, but something has shifted. The darkness is no longer heavy. It is beginning to thin, to pale. She knows it without needing to see it. The sun is turning, far beyond her sight. The world is beginning its slow return. She whispers again, to the coals, to herself, to whatever listens. Thank you for the night. It is not a plea. It is gratitude for rest, for quiet, for the chance to endure. The ember glows once more before fading to ash. The woman lies down beside her family. She can feel their warmth through the layers of cloth and time. She closes her eyes, trusting that when she wakes, there will be light. And there will be. Always. Morning arrives without announcement. No trumpet of birds, no blaze of color, only a faint shifting in the dark. A thin gray washes over the walls, so gentle that the woman at first mistakes it for dreamlight. Then she realizes the night has ended. It is not yet bright, but the air feels changed, softer, lighter. The long night has passed. The first light of the turning season has found its way back. The woman rises quietly, not wanting to wake the others. The room is cold, but not cruelly so. The embers in the hearth are faint, but alive, a few small hearts still beating in the ash. She kneels, blows gently, and the fire stirs a faint orange breath, answering hers. She feeds it a stick, then another. Soon, the shadows retreat, and the first true warmth of morning seeps into the room. The man stirs. His eyes open slowly, adjusting to the dim glow. He does not speak, he only watches the flame, as though he too cannot quite believe it's real. The children roll in their blankets, still dreaming. One murmurs a wordless sound, maybe a laugh, maybe a sigh, and turns toward the warmth. The woman steps to the door and opens it. A hush follows the kind of silence, so vast it feels alive. The air that greets her is sharp, almost sweet. Snow still covers the ground, but it gleams now, touched by the first pale gold of dawn. Above it, a narrow band of light is breaking the horizon. Not bright, not triumphant, but tender. The world is breathing again. She stands there for a long time, watching the way light moves across the snow. Slow, deliberate, patient. It touches the roof, the trees, the path. It turns the frost on the window into crystal. It paints the ordinary with wonder. Behind her, the man sits up. "Is it morning?" he asks, his voice thick with sleep. She smiles softly. "It's beginning to be." And he joins her at the doorway. Together, they stand in that grey-gold glow, saying nothing. The silence between them feels sacred, like the pause between two verses of a prayer. The children wake, blinking, stretching, They stumble to their parents' sides and peer out the door. The youngest gasps a small sound, full of awe. "It's light," he whispers, as if afraid to scare it away. And it is, faint but real, spreading gently across the land. The man laughs under his breath, a quiet, disbelieving sound. He wraps an arm around his wife's shoulders. "It's coming back," he says, "just as you said." The woman nods, but her eyes stay on the horizon. "It never really left," she murmurs. "We just couldn't see it." The words linger in the cold air, sinking into silence. They step outside. The snow crunches beneath their boots, crisp and clean. Their breath rises in white threads that catch the light before fading. The fields stretch before them, smooth and endless. Somewhere beneath that frozen skin, the earth waits patient as ever. The man kneels, scooping a handful of snow. He holds it up to the light and watches it melt slowly in his palm. The drops fall onto the ground, darkening the white. "Soon," he says quietly, as if speaking to the soil itself. "Soon, we'll begin again." The woman looks at him, the steady lines of his face, the rough strength of his hands, and feels the strange, simple truth of it. Life never stops. It only hides, waiting for gentler weather. They return inside. The children huddle near the rekindled fire. The woman places a pot of water over the flame, and soon, the faint hiss of boiling fills the air, a small, comforting music. She tears a piece of bread, dips it into the warm water, and hands it to the children. They eat slowly, quietly, as though aware that this meal belongs to something larger than hunger. The man tends to his tools, oiling a blade dulled by frost. The woman mends a tear in a sleeve. Their motions are small, humble, but there is reverence in them. After surviving the longest night, even ordinary acts feel sacred. Outside, the light strengthens. The snow begins to glitter. From somewhere in the distance, a crow calls the first sound of another day. The woman looks toward the window and sees a sparkle she hasn't seen in weeks. Sunlight catching on glass. It's faint, but unmistakable. Her chest tightens with quiet joy. She whispers, mostly to herself, "We made it." The man hears and nods, though his eyes stay on his work. "Aye," he says softly, "and the world did too." For a moment, they sit in silence, a family enclosed by warmth and faint light. The air hums with the smallest hope. Not grand, not loud, but alive. The woman glances toward the wooden bird resting on the mantel. Its carved wings glow in the returning Sunday. She smiles and touches it gently. "You see," she says to it, almost playfully, "you carried it for us, the light, all through the night." Outside, the frost begins to drip from the roof, drop by drop. The sound is faint, but it is the sound of change. The children listen, eyes wide. To them, it's like hearing time move again. The man stands, stretching. He walks to the doorway once more, looks up at the soft sky, and breathes deeply. "Smells like thaw," he says. The woman joins him, her hand finding his. Together they watch the light spill gently across the horizon. Not the fierce blaze of summer, but something purer, humbler. The kind of light that knows what it means to be gone and to return. Behind them, the fire sighs softly, and the house breathes along with it, warm, alive, unafraid. And outside, the morning widens, slowly, endlessly, until everything's snow, roof, faces, sky is touched by light once more. The longest night is over. The world is turning toward the sun again. And in this quiet moment, so are they. By late winter, the world begins to move again, quietly at first, almost shyly. The snow no longer lies in perfect stillness. It softens around the edges, dipping and sagging where sunlight lingers too long. A faint, dripping sound begins to echo through the valley, the patient heartbeat of the thaw. Inside the home, the air feels different now. The fire no longer roars each hour for survival. It hums, softer, less desperate. The woman opens the door wider in the mornings, letting in the thin light and the sharper scent of melting. The children rush to the threshold, faces flushed, watching droplets race down from the roof like tiny messengers of spring. The man stands outside longer each day. He checks the fields, tests the soil beneath the snow. When he digs a handful of it, it clumps and darkens damp, alive. He nods to himself. It is not time yet to plant, but the world is waking. The sky remains pale, but there is movement in it now. Clouds drifting faster, light changing more often. Sometimes, a single bird crosses overhead, its call breaking the long silence of months. Each sound, each motion, feels like a miracle reborn from the hush. At night, the air is still cold, but softer on the skin, no longer biting, only brushing. The frost returns, but it fades sooner each dawn. The woman notices it first, how her breath no longer clouds the air indoors, how the floorboards creak less, how the children laugh longer before crawling to the fire. These are the smallest signs of mercy. She begins to clean not for duty, but for renewal. She shakes the old blankets by the doorway, sending dust and the scent of smoke into the open air. She wipes the soot from the hearthstones. She hums as she works, the same circular tune that once filled the long nights, now lighter somehow, freer. The man hears her song drifting out the open door and smiles. That evening, as the family eats together, the sound of dripping continues from the eaves, from the trees, from everywhere. Water remembers how to fall. It becomes part of their meal, like soft percussion under their voices. The youngest child cups his hand under one steady drip and laughs when the cold water splashes. "The snow is crying," he says. The woman shakes her head gently. "No," she replies. "It's singing." The man chuckles. "It's the song of return," he says, tearing a piece of bread. Everything frozen learns to speak again. They eat in the calm rhythm of people rediscovering appetite. The soup is thin, but fragrant, with the herbs saved from summertime. A little sage. As they eat, the woman watches the steam rise from the bowls and thinks it looks like ghosts leaving the body, not haunting, but departing in peace. Afterward, the family sits quietly by the fading fire. The room smells of warmth and wet earth. The sound of dripping still falls outside, patient as time. The man takes out his small knife and begins carving again. This time, not a bird but a small flower, simple and rounded, with petals curved like hands in prayer. The wood shavings curl and fall like light snow. The woman watches his work from across the room, her fingers mending a sleeve. Between them, there is no need for talk. They understand that in each act, carving, sewing, tending, lies their way of saying thank you. When he finishes, the man places the carved flower beside the wooden bird on the mantel. For a moment, the two figures, Flight and Bloom, sit together in the firelight, symbols of things returning to life. The woman looks at them, then at the man, and says softly, "Spring will come soon." He nods, though his expression is not one of hope, but of quiet certainty. "It's already here," he answers. "It starts the moment we believe it." Outside, the moon climbs higher. The melting snow gleams like rivers of glass. The air carries a faint smell, something green, almost invisible, a scent no one can name but everyone knows. The children press their faces to the window, fogging it with breath, trying to spot what has changed. "The world looks shiny," one whispers. Their mother smiles. "That's because it's being born again." When the children fall asleep, she and her husband remain awake a while longer. They sit together in front of the fire that now burns steady and calm. No longer a shield against death, it is simply warmth companion, not guardian. He turns toward her and speaks softly. "Do you remember the first frost?" She nods. "I remember how we feared it. And now?" "Now," she says, looking toward the door where water drips from the roof. "I hear it melt, and I know it was never meant to last." He nods again, and silence returns full, gentle, alive. Outside, the world continues to thaw. Drops fall from branches, gathering into streams. Beneath the soil, roots shift in sleep. Seeds, unseen, stir toward the promise of light. The sound of water becomes the song of the night, a steady, liquid heartbeat, marking time not by loss, but by renewal. In that rhythm, the family sleeps, peacefully this time, no longer hiding from the dark, but resting in the soft pulse of change. The house breathes with them. The wind outside hums through the cracks, not in warning, but in harmony. And under the first thaw, the earth begins again, quietly, tenderly, as it always does. By early spring, the world is no longer white but streaked half snow, half soil. The fields that once slept beneath frost now begin to stir, stretching like limbs after too long a rest. The sound of dripping has turned into trickling, the trickling into flow. Small rivers return to their paths, as if remembering where they had always meant to go. The family wakes earlier now. The cold is still there, but gentler a guest, not a master. The woman stirs the ashes and finds flame waiting to be born. She smiles at the way it catches so easily now, no longer reluctant, as though the fire itself is ready to live again. Outside, the air smells different, a little wet, a little green. The man stands at the threshold, looking over the land. Beneath the trees, dark soil begins to show, rich and heavy, like the breath of something ancient exhaling. He takes a step forward, presses his boot into the ground, and watches water rise between the prints. Life, hidden for months, is coming back through the cracks. The children chase the crows from the fence. Their laughter is sharper, brighter than before. It carries farther in the thinner air. The woman watches them and feels something like relief deepen in her chest. There was a time she feared they would forget how to laugh. Now, the sound feels like sunlight made into sound. In the distance, smoke rises from other chimneys. Not desperate plumes, but steady trails. The village breathes again, each house exhaling warmth into the wide, awakening air. The man kneels by the soil. He digs with his hands, testing its readiness. It is still cold beneath the surface, but not frozen. He closes his eyes, imagining the seeds waiting in their sacks, small, hard, and filled with quiet promise. "Soon," he whispers, and the earth seems to listen. Inside, the woman clears the table. The light streaming through the window paints soft gold across the wood. Dust drifts through the air like tiny ghosts of winter, turning to glitter as it meets the Sunday. She hums again that same song, but lighter now, its rhythm steady, its tone open. When the family eats, there is laughter between bites. The bread is still coarse, the broth still thin, but every taste seems fuller. Perhaps it is the same food as before, perhaps not. Hunger changes with gratitude. Later, the man sits carving once more. His hands are surer now, his motions easier. The children watch him work, guessing what shape will emerge next. This time, it's neither bird nor flower. He shapes a small flame, smooth, rounded, flickering in form. When he finishes, he sets it beside the others on the mantle. The bird, the bloom, and now, the fire. The woman looks at them, three small symbols of survival, and feels something move quietly in her heart. "A family," she says softly. "They belong together." The man nods. "So do we." They sit for a while in that simple stillness. The window is open now. The wind carries in the faint murmur of melting streams. Somewhere, unseen, water is running again through stones, through roots, through the hidden veins of the earth. The woman reaches out her hand, touching his. The warmth between their palms feels new, though it has been there all along. In that moment, she realizes, the miracle is not that winter ended, but that they lived gently inside it, that they made warmth from fear and light from patience. The afternoon stretches slowly. The children run outside, chasing shadows on the snow that remains. The air hums faintly, a tune of beginnings. The man watches them go and smiles, his eyes soft with something beyond pride. "Do you remember," he asks quietly, "how long the night felt?" The woman nods. It felt like it would never end. And now, she looks out at the field, the sunlight, the movement of water. "Now I think," she says, "it was only resting." The man laughs gently. "So were we." Evening arrives with color for the first time in months. A soft wash of pink across the horizon, gold sliding into violet. The snow reflects it faintly, turning the whole valley into a mirror of quiet light. The family stands outside together, watching it. The cold brushes their cheeks, but it no longer stings. The wind moves through the branches like a memory whispering its goodbye. The woman breathes deeply, closing her eyes. She can smell the damp soil, the faint sweetness of thawing pine. The sound of dripping has become a song now, one she knows by heart, though she cannot hum it. It is the sound of life returning, one drop at a time. The man places his arm around her shoulder. The children hold hands beside them. None of them speak. They don't need to. Everything worth saying is already happening in the air, in the light, in the quiet rhythm of the world awakening. As dusk deepens, the first star appears. The woman looks up, smiling. "You came back too," she whispers. And in that small, perfect instant, she feels it not triumph, not joy, but peace. The kind that comes after endurance, the kind that doesn't need words. They turn back toward the house. Its windows glow softly, golden against the blue of the evening. Inside, the three carvings rest together: bird, flower, flame, a silent story of a winter survived. The door closes gently behind them. The fire stirs once more, as though greeting old friends. Outside, the snow continues to melt. The world hums low and alive. And in the small home at the edge of the field, the family sits close again, warmed not just by fire, but by everything they have carried through the dark. Spring has not yet fully come, but its promise has already arrived. And in that promise, they rest, quietly, peacefully, alive.